Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the DX Mentor, a discussion about 6-meter EME, Earth, Moon, Earth bounce with David Schmacher, KJ9I. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog of over 40 episodes covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you're new to DXing, I would highly recommend episode 1 as it was recorded with several world-class DXers. You will get a feel of the excitement that goes along with chasing DX. If you like what you find, please subscribe, like, and share. Our guest today is David, KJ9I. You may have heard David on episode 31, all about 6 meters. I received several excellent comments about that episode, and I'm sure that this one will be just as popular. I hope to get him to share the details of a 6-meter EME QSO that he was part of with a station in New Zealand, using 1 watt, a dipole antenna, via Earth, Moon, Earth. And I'll say that again. A QSO with a station in New Zealand using 1 watt, a dipole antenna via Earth, Moon, Earth on 6 meters. This discussion is somewhat dependent upon slides. There's quite a bit of useful information in the discussion, but the images, charts, etc. are also important. Because of that, we're releasing this episode in both podcast and YouTube formats at the same time. So if you listen on podcast and you really want to get into the details, you can flip right over to our YouTube channel and get more information. Without any further delay, let's get started. Well, hello and welcome to the latest episode of the DX Mentor podcast. I'm Bill, AJB, and we're going to talk about something today that I didn't even know existed, and that's my ignorance on my part. But it's 6-meter EME, Earth, Moon, Earth bounce. Never dreamed that you could do it at 6 meters. So I'm really interested. And we have an expert with us today, David Schmacher, KJ9I, and you'll recognize David from the very popular 6-meter podcast he did with us a month or two ago. So, and of course, as always, we have Joe, W8GEX. So, Joe, say good afternoon. We'll flip it over to David.
Well, good morning to everyone, and looking forward to David's podcast here today because I'm sort of like Bill. I haven't had a lot of experience at all, David, with EME, so we're certainly interested in listening to you today. So fire away, David.
All right. Well, good morning, and glad to be here. And thank you, everyone. I'm thinking that you might find this as addicting as I have. And just a forewarning, there is no cure for EME. The only thing that makes it better is bigger antennas. There's no cure that's been found yet. So you've been forewarned. 6 meters EME, oftentimes that is the only way to contact a new country because propagation doesn't sometimes land in the spot where we need it. The good thing is the moon is always there. However, with 6-meter EME, it can be extremely difficult to make contacts. So we leverage many years of EME experience. My initial EME was done on 2 meters, did that for a whole bunch of years, about 25 years ago. And a few years later, I put up my first 4x9 6M9 array for 6 meters, and I learned many things. So the experience that comes from this array started with those other EME experiences 25 years ago. And part of what I'm going to do, I'm going to move through some ideas here rather quickly. The initial 2-meter array that I had was a 2 high by 4 wide, 8 Yagi array, and those booms were about 32 feet. They were M2 2 MXP 28s on an H frame that was 50 feet wide of 25G tower. So that was the cross boom on that array. And just the 2-meter system had the 8 Yagis. It had LMR 400 for phasing lines, and then Andrew LDF7, which is 1 5/8 heliax out to the array. So just kind of the highlights. And then the first 6-meter array I built was 4 6M9 KHW array. This was all M2 hardware, including the rotators, including the H frame, including the antennas. Everything was M2. And when I built this array, there were some things I got right, but there were a number of things that I knew I could do better. So what terminated these two arrays is my career decision. I wanted to work in defense technology, so I persuaded my wife we're moving to Iowa because that was the only company that would hire me without having been in the military or having a prior security clearance. So we moved to Iowa, took down both EME arrays, and there went my EME. But when we came back to Wisconsin, that flame was still alive, and that want to do the system right that I didn't feel I quite got right with the initial 6-meter system. So that's what the current system does. The antennas that I built just for 6 meters changed a lot. The first one that I used, 1998, was an M squared 6M 2.5 WLC, about a 50-foot boom. From there, I moved to M squared 6M9 KHWs, 4 of those on my EME array. After that, I moved to a C3I 51-foot boom, 13 element. Still wasn't totally happy with everything about it, so I moved to the InnovAntennas LFA. That's really the one that I use now and really like a lot. However, the original LFA has a square boom. There's a big debate, kind of like, what do you drive, a Ford or a Chevy? Square boom or round boom, right? People are just passionate about it like it's a cult. I'm a round boom fan because of wind, and the manufacturer only offers square booms, so I made my own boom, and that's what is in the antennas that are currently in use. All right, and how things have changed across 25 years. Back in the original days, when I was on 2 meters, this is 2000 to 2003, EME was all CW. There was a newsletter put out by Delta Fox 2 Zulu Charlie that would tell you kind of weekly what's going on. There's a gentleman out in Canada, VE7BQH, Lionel. He is just a wealth of information. He would arrange, when de-expeditions would happen, he would arrange schedule slots, and it was not a list. It was more, you had a prearranged time that you operated because he leveraged knowing where the moon was at a given time. So you had about a 10-minute window, and you either made the contact with the DX station or you didn't. And if you didn't, it goes on to the next person. So Lionel arranged all of that. Now, well, how does it work now? Pretty much everything is digital modes, WSJT. Websites are used to forecast de-expedition activity. We've got wideband WSJ decoding that can decode DC to daylight. And web pages are used heavily to coordinate QSO tries. Those are the key differences between then and now. When I set out to build this current array, I was really convinced that I wanted to do another 2 high by 4 wide array for 6 meters because the Yagis are shorter booms. It's just very practical. But here was the problem that stopped me. The cross boom at 6 meters would have to be 90 feet wide, 90. And I thought, and I do not have 2 towers available to do the rotate the both towers thing like some have done. So from a single support, I just decided, as much as I really wanted to do that, I opted away and went for the 4 nines. Problem is, being a little bit perfectionist, I wanted it to be 4 10s. So I built the 4 LFA 10s. That's what I currently use on a support structure that was a repurposed Coast Guard tower. Started out rusting, sitting on top of a rusting school bus in a scrapyard. I rescued it, basically took it, had it hot dip galvanized. I made my own parts for cross members of the tower, the pieces that were missing, to make it a complete tower, and that's what I use today as the tower. The rotators that I use are prop pitch rotators. They were by the late K7NV, Kurt Andrus. He's a guy out in Nevada that was a mechanical engineer, and he just was very good at taking these apart all the way down to 0 and cleaning, sandblasting, painting, lubricating, putting them back together. When you get a rotor back that was done by K7NV, it is just a well-oiled machine that is like it's brand new. So I bought from him the extra large prop pitch for azimuth, and then he custom made, having problems with elevation rotators, I gave to him specifications and requirements and asked if he would build me a custom elevation rotator using a small prop pitch. He did that. And the reason we did that is there is nothing available commercially that really would do what I needed. So it was a custom deal. Low noise amplifier at the array and TR sequencing. The software, 20 years ago, you would use basically two software applications. One, you would use an application to turn your computer to track the moon. And secondly, you would use an audio processing application called LinRad. Two software applications, that's it. Okay, how many are there today? 3, 6, 9, 12, about 15. 15 software applications are regularly used in the moon bounce game. And so the use of software has become prevalent in this arena, primarily because of WSJT, which has really enabled 6-meter EME. And let me just contrast the performance of 6-meter EME 20 years ago and now. When I was on with the 46M9s, it would take on average 10 to 15 tries to get one QSO. Okay, that's how using CW, that's how difficult it typically could be because conditions don't often line up right. Now with WSJT, it's more like 8 or 9 out of 10 tries, you get a QSO because the software is so much better, the signal to noise ratio, that it can dig those weaker signals out of the mud, and it just has totally revolutionized the game. So if you hear people commend Joe Taylor and the work that that team has done, it's real.
Wow.
The system diagram for the current system shows a conventional K3S radio, and then in front of that, I've got a transverter made by SSB Electronic out of Germany. It's got a noise figure of less than 1 dB, and then that has separate transmit receive feed lines. I use that that puts out about 6 or 7 or 8 watts. I use that to drive a Elecraft KPA 500. That gets me up to a little over 100 watts, and then that's what I use to drive the final amplifier, which is a Henry 4006A. Let's describe that as a prototype that never went to production. They made 2 of these. I was lucky to get one of them, and I rebuilt it because there were 28 or 30 things that needed to be updated so that it was WSJT capable. It was designed for 50% duty cycle modes, CW and SSB. When I got it, it would regularly fail on me, and so I basically overhauled aspects of it. The tower side, we've got the 4 LFA10 antennas, and then we've got dual rotators. They're both prop pitches. The extra large prop pitch rotates the system in azimuth, and the small prop pitch rotates the system in elevation, both of which use green Heron RT21 Deluxe controllers that are driven by a PC and the software to track the moon.
Wow.
The array pattern shows a predicted 21.12 dBi of system gain with the 4 antennas, and the pattern was created by Justin G0KSC, of course, who's the inventor and the guy with the great idea of the LFA. Also, Lionel VE7BQH makes tables that accurately depict the performance of specific antennas to show kind of a bake-off of which antennas are better at which size point. And so you can look at this and determine the kind of the best bang for the buck. And this is what helped me go into the 10 LFA. The GT, gain temperature ratio for EME performance, it's kind of a performance measure of how clean is the pattern, how much does it look forward and not to the sides, not to the back. You want that to be as low as possible. This is minus 17.7, or I'm sorry, you want that to be less negative, right? The less negative that number is, the better your GT. And that number is all about rejecting noise off the sides and grabbing that signal right off the moon. I use low noise amplifier out of the tower. This is another thing people sometimes will debate. Is that smart? Is that not smart? I'm a believer in putting the LNA out at the tower, but I have worked people that don't use any LNA, so it varies. An LNA, of course, is low noise amplifier. When you do have a low noise amplifier, switching and great care is required because there's typically a field effect transistor inside that LNA. And FETs are very electrostatic discharge sensitive, which means if you look at them wrong, they fail. So what you have to do is put many protective devices around that system. So that's why you'll see transient absorption Zehners, TAZs that are used from various leads to ground. That's to get rid of spikes, to eat voltage spikes, so they don't get to the FET inside the preamp. 20 years ago, before I had all this protective stuff in my system, I lost half a dozen preamps here or there. Luckily, with this system, knock on wood, I have yet to lose one. So the system is robust, seems to work pretty well. There's a showing what the as-built looks like of the box that I have out at the tower with the TR switching relays, 2 of them, and then the low noise amplifier right out at the array to preserve maximum signal to noise ratio and keep your system noise figure as low as possible. And then, of course, sequencing is required. That's the other thing that complicates this is when you do transmit receive, you have to have a sequencer that makes sure that you switch the transmitter off, wait a couple tenths of a second minimum before you engage that preamp so that the preamp doesn't get hit by your transmit RF. All right, and documentation is important. The cabling between the house and the tower is well documented because the control cable system is rather complex. And therefore, I keep a spreadsheet that shows which wire goes where all the way through end to end for troubleshooting. And I use little troubleshooting test point boxes at the top of my tower, which is only about 34 feet tall. And those make nice test points in the event that you need to troubleshoot cabling. Luckily, I have not needed to use these yet, but they are there should that need arise. So conventional system, the K3 radio with the LT6S 6-meter transverter. And then I've got multiple receive computers because that helps with hearing signals. The late KB8RQ from Brookville, Ohio, he used to use, I believe it was 5 separate receive computers on his large 2-meter system. And Gary taught me the value of having multiple receive computers. I have a couple extra, but it just helps you. Sometimes you'll get a decode on one that you will not get on another. So at one point, when we were using JT65A, I would use a trio of operating systems. I would have at least one Windows PC with WSJTX. I would have another one with Mac with WSJTX, and I would have third with at least one variant of Linux on it, and I would be receiving with all 3 of those. Interestingly, there were times that one would receive stuff, the other would not. Now, what's really strange is I'm not able to explain why, but the one that would typically win the bake-off, if it heard stuff others couldn't, was the old Windows XP Toughbook laptop.
Really?
That was the one, yeah. That I don't know if it was quieter inside, what the reason was, but that computer would, when we were running JT65A, would out decode the others. Because it ran Windows XP, it's not around any. I mean, I still have it, but I can't use it on the current WSJTX. But back in the day, that was the star of the party. And those of you that know me, I'm a big Mac fan, so it was hard for me to accept that I have to say my Windows computer's better. But it performed better.
I would have bet Linux. If you'd said ahead of time, I would have bet Linux, but
Yeah. And the Linux stuff is just so fun. It's just really, really interesting.
yeah.
And speaking of Linux, Bill, back to the original system on 2 meters, the Linrad application was run on Linux. My very first Linrad was run on Red Hat. I got to think, was it Red Hat 7 or 8? Something way
Wow.
back then. Yeah. And that was what you would use to pre-process your audio to try to dig it out of the noise a little better. That program, by the way, was written by SM5, I think it's BSZ Leaf, very bright PhD guy that is just total moon bounce guy. But yeah, Linux does shine in a lot of places. Now the receive system with multiple computers depicted here, off of the antenna, the receive line, I'll take a splitter, just a conventional two-way splitter, and feed one side of that to my conventional receive chain, that is the transverter and the K3, and then to the computers that are hooked to that. And then the other side goes to a, well, right now, I used to have the Link RF IQ Plus Rev C receiver. Right now I have the AirSpy R2 SDR dongle, and then SDR console, which is known as SDR radio. That's the software that has the best noise blanker of anything out there. So those are the two receive chains on the current system. And here's a depiction of that system. The AirSpy R2 is just an SDR receiver dongle. Noise figure for that's 3.5 dB, but remember, ahead of that, you've got your LNA out of the tower, and that really sets your noise figure of the system. Okay, so the system really consists of two computers. I've got my Mac, which is my transmit computer, and then I've got my Windows, which is a receive-only computer.
Boy.
All right. The original software that was used to track the moon was Nova for Windows by W9IP. Really worked great. I loved it. However, it was written and compiled back in the day. This would run on XP and 7, but I could not get it to run on Windows 10. So I don't use this anymore. I've changed the software. Here's the original LinRad. Bill, you mentioned Linux. Here is the software that would do your audio pre-processing. So you would basically work on this and select your signal, filter it, and tailor it to exactly what was needed to get the best signal that you could then hear with CW.
Wow.
Yeah, really good stuff. Then
Yeah.
in today's world, we have PST rotator, which I currently use to do the rotator turning the array to track the moon. And the new WSJ-T has an application called MAP65. Now, what's unique about that is you can watch the entire band and decode the entire band wall to wall. That can be very beneficial if you are, oh, I don't know, contesting or something like that, or just trying to find out what's everything out there. All right, here's another software. By the way, here you go, Bill, more Linux. This was Fedora Core Linux, and it's showing Moonsked. Moonsked is my favorite application for determining schedule times, for figuring out when the moon is going to be where, and planning schedules. It was written by the late GM4 JJJ, David Anderson. He was a big moon bounce guy in Scotland, also an excellent software developer. The reason I like Moonsked over the other options that are out there is he's got the features built into this that just make it beautiful for moon bounce, and he's got it compiled for Windows or Linux or Mac. He's got it compiled for all three. Now, unfortunately, he's a silent key, but before he passed, he made it available as freeware. It is currently still today available on the internet that people can download and use this software. And it is still my favorite pick for moon bounce sched planning and determining conditions.
Very cool.
Yeah, it has graphs that show the different times of the lunar cycle across the month. So there are certain days when these curves drop down low. That's when you want to be on the moon. When the curves are way up high, that means the moon is in front of a very noisy sky. You might as well go play golf or chess or something else, because you're not going to hear EME signals on those days. And then some screenshots of the certain contacts. I'll move through these rather quickly, but a few of the contacts that I've made, this is the Q65-60A mode. Here's YL2 Gulf Delta. And then you can see, here's SDR console. This is the software that I mentioned has the superior noise blanker. Now, I don't know what the secret sauce is in this noise blanker, but myself and a number of others have discovered by testing, by A/B testing, this noise blanker outperforms others. Even Flex Radio, I know Flex Radio makes great stuff. I'm not trying to bash anyone else, but this noise blanker is the best. It really is. And Simon Brown, the author of this software, basically develops it for commercial applications and sells it to commercial people. However, he gives it away free to hams. In a way, we are kind of like his beta testing environment. He gives it away to us, and I have his permission to use this in my data communication and networking classes that I teach. So he lets us use it and find if there are any issues, get those back to him. We can use it at no charge. It's a beautiful software application. And N2EME, who's probably the expert on this software, has done a couple of YouTubes on how to set it up, because it's no small task to set it up. But you can set this up just as Flex Radio has different slices of different radios. You can set this up on a single SDR dongle. You can listen to all different parts of the 6-meter band. That is, you can listen to CW beacons, you can listen to the CW band, and you can listen to the sideband area, and you can listen to all of the segments, the FT8, the FT4, the Q65 terrestrial, the meteor scatter, all those separately. And those are what you'll see here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different quote unquote slices. That's what's happening here, is you can monitor all of them. Okay, once you get set up, what can you do with all this stuff? What use is it? There are a handful of people that travel. Lance W7GJ is one of them. He travels the world around, and I save screenshots of my contacts because I just enjoy looking at these, looking back and going, how strong was Lance when he was in Mayotte? Well, here it is. Here is the screenshot that I took from his trip. And of course, you can see from WSJT in the lower center, this was September of 2022 that this trip took place. I also had a little fun by color coding the waterfall to match the lemurs that were present where he was. So it's just really fun, the things that you can do with the WSJT-X. Here is 3 Bravo 9 GJ and Rodriguez. Notice at the 1500 hertz mark under the T-bar, kind of in the lower center of the screen, look at that vertical sync trace, how beautifully prominent that is. And then the paint splashes over on the right side of that. That, of course, is your payload. Those are your tones of your signal that you're sending. This is the kind of stuff I love showing my students to help them understand this is how you do data communication in the current world. And they seem to love the digital communication modes.
So, David, if these guys are going on DXpeditions, what kind of equipment are they taking to be able to bounce a signal to you?
Yeah, great question.
Or is it all on you to do all the heavy lifting?
Well, no, Lance does a great job. He's one of, and Lance and some others, Bernie ZS4TX in South Africa. Lance basically takes one 42-foot Yagi and a 1.5 kilowatts, and he has a SDR dongle receive, which I think is his secret sauce with SDR console. And he's able to find these locations to minimize the noise. That's the big problem, is minimizing the noise, because we've all got that problem increasingly. But he finds locations that are low enough noise that he just hears really, really well. Matter of fact, he hears so well. When he went to Clipperton Island, he heard me. And at the time, I only had a single Yagi on the horizon on 6 meters. He heard me. I could not decode him, but he heard me.
Wow.
So yeah, it's sometimes 6 meters is one way. It'll drive you crazy, and it'll make you go, do I still have an antenna connected? Right? It really can be. I always say you need an iron stomach for this band, because it's the highest of the highs when it works, and it's the lowest of the lows when it doesn't work. So
can you get partial credit for Clipperton, or no? I guess not.
No, but here's what happened, Bill. I was very lucky because the group that just went there, Tango X-Ray 5 Sierra,
right,
made a big effort to contact them, and I was successful. So they took 2 side-by-side 6-element Yagis, and they put a pretty good effort on 6 meters. So luckily, yes, I got that back, that one that I had missed from where Lance went. But on all of his other trips, most of them, and I'm going to say there are like 11 places he went. He goes kind of every year to a different DXQTH. I only missed him on 2 of them, and luckily both of them I was able to catch up through thanks to other expeditions. So the other one was 5 Whiskey, and there was a guy from Croatia, 983 MR, that went over there, and I was lucky to work Rolando when he was there. So, and here's Lance at Austral Island, and again, you can look and see the trace under the about 15, 20 hertz, something like this. Let me just show a couple more. Marquesas Island is here. Look at all the callers, as you can see on the odd minutes. So it's not just me who's hearing Lance. These other stations, you can see all the callers. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about 8 callers right now. And Lance encourages that when he's on. He says, do not stop calling, because sometimes you'll get fades. And if you keep calling at different offset frequencies, he can still decode and find out who's where. And he's really good at picking out who to call at a certain time, and then running with them to try to complete the QSOs. Here's Swains Island. That was another big thrill. I coached and guided the team here. KOSCA did a great job putting Swains Island on, and Adrian was really happy also that we completed a contact. So this was the same antenna that Lance uses, basically a single 42-foot antenna and a kilowatt.
So David, I'll tell you a funny story about Swains. We had Adrian on about a month ago, and in prep for that, we found a video where he makes the first 6 meter contact, and gets up and he's dancing around in the sand. Unbeknownst to him, one of the team members had their camera on and took a picture of him dancing in the sand. So if you go to their website, it's there. He's worked somebody and he's dancing around. It was kind of a hoot, wasn't it, Joe?
Yes, very much so.
I can't wait to see that. That is really awesome. Well, here's the other end of that QSO right here. So yeah, that is great stuff. Here's Clipperton, and this was the Clipperton station. This one was interesting too. I could hear him really, really well. He had trouble hearing me, okay? And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you'll get Faraday fade or lockout. So it's not always easy, but with a lot of patience, it usually will work. All right, this goes back to JT65 4S7AB. You can see, and this is, Bill, one of the Linux computers. This is Fedora Core 30. I had a separate receive computer here, and this was in the day when we would have calls and the letter OOO as part of the report. That was the EME exchange. The OOO was the signal report, the TMO for signal report, and then the RO after that, and the triple R to complete. Here's the other Linux Debian receive computer with Alpha 21 EME being decoded. And at the time, he was calling WA4NJP, Ray. So the extra receive computers came in handy. Just a few more of these. There's S79GJ. There's Tango 77 Charlie, which is, yeah, some guys that took, I think it was 2 8-element antennas over to Tango 7. Here's VK9XGJ. That was Lance over in Christmas Island. And this would have been right at my moon set, which corresponded, his moon was rising. And then here's a flashback to the real old days of WSJT. This is before JT65, and it asks, who remembers JT44? That was the original mode that Joe Taylor used for moon bounce. And if you look at this display, you can see I used a green highlighter to highlight the letters that were real characters. But what you had to do at that time is go fishing through the stream of characters looking for letters that were real, right? And as you can see, the other stuff is garbage or noise, but you can see as you look through this, my call sign, and then I was called by ZL7 Charlie and the OOO, which was the signal report. And then of course the RO and the triple R to complete the QSO. And on this one, you got kind of a 37 on the end. So didn't get it to 73, but we got a 37 out of that. You
Wow.
had, yeah. ZL1RS, Bob Sutton, is a really veteran expert EME guy on 6 meters, 2 meters, any band. He's very fun, a good friend, and he loves technical challenges. So during one of the moon bounce contests I was on the whole weekend, and Bob decided to have a little fun with me. By the way, I did not know he was doing this. He just started playing this game of how low can you go, as in, okay, if I put up a 3-element antenna, can KJ9I hear him? And I did not know he was doing this, but there's the screenshot. No problem. We made a contact with his 3-element Yagi on a pole in his field.
Gee,
Now,
I wouldn't
that's
have bet-
cool,
yeah.
but that wasn't good enough for Bob. So Bob kept playing the how low can we go game. And he said, what if I put up a dipole? Can Dave hear that? Here's the QSO. That was kind of the highlight of what can happen with 6 meter EME. Now, yeah, we made a contact with Bob using only a dipole, and here it is, a dipole on a pole in his field aimed at the moon, which you can see in the background, and I was using the 410s. The other thing that Bob knew is he leveraged ground gain. This QSO took place when my moon was setting, which means you get cumulative gain as the signal rolls across the earth, the ground in that direction where the moon is setting. And he leveraged ground gain on his end because his moon was rising. It was not up real high. So leveraging ground gain on both ends makes a QSO like this possible. And but yeah, this is one I will never, ever, ever forget. And this was October of 22, a dipole.
So what's fascinating about that is that that dipole's essentially radiating in all directions. So there's no forward gain or anything. It's just throw some power out there and some small percentage is going to hit the moon.
That's correct. This is 0 dB dipole, 0 dBd, right? Yes.
Because who would have ever thought, because you always think of EME as all these big arrays,
Yes.
you know, and then he comes down. I just checked my log, and I worked him on 6 meters FT8 for New Zealand. So that was a new country for me on 6 with him. Interesting.
Fantastic. Bob is
Wow.
an incredible guy, and he loves stuff like this. He's just really a great guy. Yeah. This
Gee.
is all Bob. Okay. What I learned from the first arrays, maximize the signal, more Yagis, minimize the noise. I'm a believer in high quality components to reduce the long-term cost. I don't always go for the lowest price tag. I go for the best value. Mechanical balance is essential, not optional. Good feed line, and then use EME expeditions and contests to work new ones. If anybody's interested, Joe Taylor wrote a great article on the frequency dependent characteristics of the EME path. And you can find that on http://physics.princeton.edu/KE1JT/EME_Hotel Bravo Kilo.pdf. That article is really fascinating for those that also find the physics of EME interesting.
And I will have that in the show notes. So if somebody's driving, they don't need to pull over and write that down.
Beautiful, beautiful. That is awesome. Okay, the next section, and this is going to be a very rapid trip through the construction of the array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go very fast here, just briefly narrating what took place to build the current 410s LFA array. I started with my old 2-meter tower and had to extend onto it. And of course, this was done in the winter in Wisconsin. So a little bit of snow on the antennas or on the tower helps. I used a car jack to move the thing around because it's heavy. And the late N9JUU made custom stainless steel plates for the rotators, the rotator plate, the mid plate, and the top plate. And then I basically added on to do the 410s. I needed this tower to be about 30 feet plus the base. So the bottom section, I had to home brew all the pieces, the cross braces. Now I'm an electrical engineer, not a mechanical, but I did my best imitation of a mechanical engineer. And I fabricated those cross pieces on that bottom section. I drilled them myself. And then after they were done and I test fit them by pre-assembling the tower, then I took it apart and I took them up to a hot dip galvanizing place where they made them look like brand new, then put it all back together. Then to make a concrete base for this thing, which has to line up, of course, when the crane comes, I transported the whole tower up to the fabricator who's named Randy. He's shown right here, and he returned this custom fit, welded together tower base with all the legs perfectly fitting and all the holes lining up. And the way that we did that is we took the tower to him and then he welded up the base to fit. And that's how we knew that when the crane came and set this, that it would line up and be level. Okay. And Randy's the guy that built all of my difficult stuff. He's amazing. You can give him a halfway decent drawing, even hand sketch, and he produces excellence with materials. I drove the base down to Illinois because it was the only place that had a galvanizing dip tank big enough to do the job. Got it back. And then Randy also laser cut the stainless plates so that the new prop pitch rotators and bearings by K7NV would fit. So K7NV did the drawings, Randy did the laser cutting, and away we go. Here's pouring the tower, and I'll go through these kind of quickly. Here are the ballons. I made my own phasing lines. The phasing lines are 4 quadruplets of 7/8 heliacs. Made them myself and cut them to within 0.1% of each other so that there would be no loss on phasing lines. I built my own 4-way power divider using the W7GJ design out of aluminum square stock, and then Randy basically did the drilling on this. You use a brass hobby tube down the center, that's your center conductor, and then Teflon insulators with air dielectric, and then you basically create a 4-way power divider. And I measured it at 51 megahertz. You could see perfect match there, and also at 50 megahertz.
Wow.
And then while we're waiting for the concrete to set, I put together the tower, get things ready to go, started assembling Yagis. Here are the elements, which I did in my heated garage, because this is winter in Wisconsin. So I did as much as I could inside, and then I would go outside only when I needed to. Here are the booms. They are 58 feet long, 4 of them. And then, of course, start putting the elements on the booms and leveling them all. And so here are some pictures of that. The rotators, the azimuth rotator originally was from a B29. It was a prop pitch from a real B29. These photos, by the way, are by Tim Blank, N0TB. He's a friend and an excellent photographer. And he found a couple B29s up at the EAA Oshkosh Air Show in Wisconsin. Here is the prop pitch that when K7NV got it ready, he shipped it to me and bearings, but not all of it arrived. And I didn't know this for about 2 weeks after because I did not have time to discover that this piece shown here was missing. Now, if you look at the box in the lower right of this photo, you can see that the side of the box looks like it was sliced open.
Yeah.
Best we can determine, and my favorite, that is a sarcastic remark, shipping carrier, we believe that this box inside one of their trucks fell off of something or a conveyor belt, and that ring probably sliced the box open. That ring was never to be found again. And I was in communication with the highest levels of that company trying to find that piece because it's from a World War II aircraft. Where are you going to get another one?
Sure.
Well, luckily, K7NV scrambled, found another guy in the Bay Area of California that had another one of these just like this, talked the guy out of that ring that we needed, and he fixed it up and sent it to me. We did finally get that shipping carrier to pay a claim, but it was a learning lesson for all of us, and it was difficult to accept that they never did find that ring. It happens. Then we pre-assembled the rotators in the tower. And I gotta keep the pace moving here. This is Roan 55G, the cross boom. Conventionally, you would add the vertical supports to the tower on the side like this, but really up the center is better. So I figured out a way to modify the 55G, and this involved relocating some of the cross members and basically put the mounts for this in the middle of the tower. So that's so that everything's on center and more balanced. So that's what's happening here. And then here's the lightning protection for the control leads. Antennas being finished. Here's the top plate for the tower. I also have a camera on my array so that when I'm in my Radio Shack, I can tell if the array is pointed at the moon or not. And so here's my camera. All right, the crane day, October of 2019. I hand dug the coax and lines into the trench to get them out to the tower. And I was going to direct bury them, but the late KB8RQ cranked on my arm and he said, you really should put them in irrigation pipe or something because critters might chew through your heliacs or your cables. So I listened to him and I put irrigation tubing around the cables. Thus far, that's been a good strategy so far. Okay, here's the picture of the antennas ready to go up.
Wow.
Here are the drawings on the rotator. And again, this came from, I had given K7NV the requirements and specifications. Kurt did the design. He's a very good mechanical guy. He designed this from nothing and built this. Along the way, N0TB was also getting interested in EME and decided he was going to put up an array. So it was helpful that Tim also decided to buy one of these rotators. So Tim and I bought the only two of these that were built. And here are some of the drawings and pictures of the pieces as they were being fabricated. To avoid the prior problem of that shipping carrier losing stuff, Tim came up with the idea. He said, you know, my brother Dean, N9DL, has a brand new truck. He said, what if we drive out to Nevada and go get the stuff? And I'm thinking, this is crazy. But it was a really good idea. And that's what we did. We did a long road trip to Nevada. It was 4,419 miles round trip. Took 3 days drive each direction. And we went and picked up the our rotators so that there was no possibility that a shipping carrier would gum them up.
Wow.
So here's a picture of N0TB, myself, N9DL, and N9BDR. We basically split up the driving and kept the truck rolling, you know, around the clock to make that trip. And here's the elevation rotator that Kurt designed, and then was it K7PN? There's another guy that makes rotating tower rings. He did those two side rings on the sides, and then Kurt used those on part of the rotator. And you can see the prop pitch on its side. I mean, this thing just works beautifully. And if you take off cables, it'll turn not only 360 degrees, it'll keep turning 720 degrees. It'll just keep going. There's nothing to stop it. So you do have to make sure that you're watching what you're doing as you're rotating things. Here's the H-frame that I constructed before I put it up. And this was crane day of putting up the antennas. I hired a professional company because these antennas are 58 feet long and each one is 135 pounds. It's more than a one-man lift. And so we've got two lifts here and a tower crew that put the bottom two antennas on the H-frame first, then the top two antennas, and we were finally on the air August 7th of 2020. And so there's the array ready to go and rotating in elevation. N0TB, a good photographer, also has a drone. So Tim came over and he ran his drone around and took some pictures of things, which was really kind of special also. And here's what that looks like at the QTH. All right. However, 6 months later, I could not hear. People with smaller systems were out hearing me. Imagine going through all of this and then I couldn't hear stuff. I'm going, why? Well, there's one reason, and that is noise. So out I go with my car and a little home-built dipole to start direction finding noise sources. And one finding was the type of heliax connectors I use, they're RPC connectors, loosened up on me. I had them very tight. I did them all myself, and I'm pretty anal with quality, but they were loose when I rechecked about a year later. So those all got replaced with L5 PDF, the old ones that you manually tighten with wrenches, so that never happens again. And I located an arcing transformer across the road. Luckily, my power company has been awesome. They've come out and they've fixed stuff very quickly when I report it and I direction find it. And when that wasn't everything, I found another 20 dB of noise, which was arcing lightning arresters just south of my location. And luckily, when I reported those, they also came out, replaced those. That brought me 29 dB of improvement, but I still couldn't hear. Scratching head, why? Well, my buddy Tim at 99W said, why don't you unplug that camera once more? And I said, well, I did that already. He said, try it again. So I unplugged the camera. There goes another 13 dB of noise.
Wow.
Yeah, so my camera, my precious camera that I use to show the position of the array, I turn it off when I'm receiving now. I keep it on to position the array, but when I'm listening, that goes off because that's 13 dB of noise that covers up signals. Inside of the camera case, there's a heater, and I think there's something in that heater that, could I make this EMI quiet? Possibly, but the easier fix is just switch it off when I'm receiving. So finally, then I could hear again. All right, and not to add more drama, but not even a year later, not quite happy birthday to my new EME array, a tornado. July of 2021, middle of the night comes through, and here's what I saw the next morning. And Joe, I know you were talking about a tornado and looking out that night with the flashlights. I didn't do that. I kind of didn't want to see what was out there. So the next day I go outside and here's what I found. The upper right, that was my single LFA on the horizon. That was a homebrew 2-inch boom that failed, but I had it turned sideways to where the tornado came across. So it not a surprise. And then of course on the EME array, one of the Yagis, the back of the boom snapped. I'm happy the H-frame, the tower, the big stuff survived, and replacing that one section of aluminum tubing on that Yagi was not really a big deal. But yes, tornadoes do happen.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to all these people who helped with building things, and especially my wife who put up with me building stupid big stuff like this. But it's been a real great trip. Result so far is 30 new countries that I would not have had without this system, and they're listed here.
And what's clear from your list, you're covering the geographic globe. So now it's a matter of, in other words, it's not like you can get to a point but no further. You can get anywhere you need to get. Now it's just a function of catching the moon at the right time and on both ends. And
absolutely, because for example, when would we get a sporadic E opening to Spratly Islands? Never. And yet with the moon there, it's workable. Yeah, that just makes things possible that would never otherwise happen. 5 Whiskey Zero, that's another one I have never, in all the years of being on terrestrial prop, I have never heard 5 Whiskey on terrestrial. There's a guy that lives there, Atsu, 5W1SA, but I've never heard him. So the moon was required for that as well.
Holy smokes.
I never really was a contester, but with EME, it's different. I just find this fun, even back to my 2-meter CW days when you'd have a pileup of DLs calling you on CW off the moon. So I played in a couple contests just kind of to try it out. The Italians hold this ARI EME contest. I was lucky to be successful on that one in 2022. And then this current year in the ARRL EME, I was very pleased to make over 100 contacts, 119, which was a big effort. And I operated the entire contest the whole time the moon was up. The year before that, I did the first place with 410,000 score, 79 contacts. So I'm having a little fun with the contesting thing. And it was during these contests that Bob Sutton just decided, let's have a little fun with my dipole. That's what Bob does. It just makes this so fun to push the limits of what you can do with EME.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
So I've got a quick question before I need to leave, David. If a new person like me, never been on EME, and after looking at all this absolutely beautiful antenna system that you have, so for our listeners, if we wanted to get started, what's the basic thing that we need to do?
Well, there are multiple right answers there, Joe. It varies. It varies on what you can and want to do. People have done things ranging from a single long Yagi on a tower with an azimuth only rotator. I did that for many years. I had a single LFA 10 up 90 feet. You can use that, but it's horizon only, so you're limited. Once you decide you want to elevate, there are people that will elevate a single like 6M9 or something like that. But the problem with that is you don't really have enough gain to make that work. And logistically, it's problematic because the back of your antenna, when elevated, hits your guy wires. So what typically becomes practical then is a 4 Yagi array of shorter antennas, like 4.5s. K5XI has 4.5s, 4.6s. There are guys out there with 4.6s. N1DG does really well with 4.6 LFAs, 4.7s. So where do you want to, how big do you want to go is the question, Joe. And really, whatever you put up, there are days that it's not big enough. And on the other hand, there are other days when it's just delightful. So it's just so hard to give you a concise answer there, Joe, but I hope that that helps.
So you mentioned N1DG, David. That's Don Greenbaum, right?
Right.
Yeah, he's a very, very good friend. So we're gonna do a podcast with him tonight.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Say hello to Don. Yes, he's a good guy. Yes.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I was on Midway with him years ago.
So this might be the first DX conversation I've ever had that the word sunspots didn't come up, because basically you're not reflecting anything off the atmosphere, you're reflecting off the moon. So I'll say something somewhat broad. Sunspots really don't matter. Is that fair to say?
Well, they're not as important as they are for terrestrial propagation, but they can gum things up sometimes. If you get a lot of solar activity, CMEs, you can get things gummed up a little bit for a short period of time. But typically 6 meters is mostly based on, where's the moon? Is it in the quiet part of the sky? But again, with the caveats that there are days when you will hear a signal perfectly and they have trouble hearing you, or vice versa. I mean, that's just the nature of 6 meters. So, right, sunspots really don't drive you like they do in other modes.
Mm-hmm.
What's appealing to me about this is that there's a lot of things actually, but one of them is just rolling up your sleeves and building all of this stuff.
Yes.
Right. So I've got a Flex sitting here that can do 6 meters, but nothing else I have right now would work. So I'd have to, roll up my sleeves and actually do some learning and do some studying, do some building, which is really interesting to me. So, wow.
It's addicting, Bill. You've been warned. It is addicting.
I can see that even on even on terrestrial, right? Because oh gosh, I can't get into Asia. What do I have to do? Well, I have a hex beam at 20 feet. Well, if it was at 50 feet, it would be a lot better. And if I had an LPA, that would be a lot better. And if I had an amplifier. So you're right. All of a sudden, holy smokes.
And this array does also work on terrestrial. It will help you on terrestrial. There are things that I work terrestrially that I probably would not have worked without the 4-bay array. But yeah, it is a big project, and I had forgotten that because 20 years ago I built the last one, and it is a large project, but gratifying.
Yes. Well, I just checked my clock. I apologize, but I'm going to have to leave for my appointment. And this has been absolutely fascinating, David. And the best of luck to you on this. And it's just this is a great podcast. This will go over.
Yeah, and David, I'd also like to, if you're interested, I'd love to have you present this to the our DX club. And right now we'll have after the DX dinner, we have a summer break, but I'm looking at like September, October. So if you'd be interested, I'd love to have you come back and do that.
Absolutely. Joe,
Wow.
thank you. Bill, thank you. This is great. I'd be happy to help with other presentations. And yeah, I just love sharing this. It's just it's really fun. It gets in your blood, and like I said, there is no cure. There's
I
no
have,
cure.
I have one last question because I took some notes during your presentation, and there at the end, you answered all my questions, except are you using FT8 or 4?
I have only used FT8 so far. I have not made a single FT4 contact yet.
Okay. I just wondered. Okay,
I
well,
go where the DX is, Joe. Wherever they go, I will go. So if they go to FT4, I'll be there too.
I'll be good boy. Thanks a million, guys. See you later.
Take care, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Watch the skies. Wow, David, really, really interesting. And congratulations to you. I mean, I love your approach. It's like I could go buy all this phasing cables. I'll make my own because that seems to me that's part of this. And there was a group in Middletown, Ohio years ago. And I mean, I was in college, so we're talking about 80, 81. But I did a couple of VHF contests with them. Everything they had in this guy's garage was all homebrew, and there were gas vets and all kinds of stuff. And I was an engineering student, but I can remember I would better serve these guys if I were a plumber than if I were an engineer, because like you said, you prefer the round tubing and the mass, and other people have the square. Um, and then building, and I know there's waveguides and the power splitter and all these other things. So this is like all that stuff you touched on when you were studying for your test, but it was out there, and now it's kind of like, wow, this stuff really is there, and it can be implemented. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's terrific fun, Bill. And the other thing is, if you're the perfectionist that goes for the extra 0.1 dB on your system, then EME is a great game for you because it matters in this game. That 0.1 dB can really make the difference between QSO, no QSO, decode, no decode. It really, every 0.1 dB matters. And I mean, there are people out there that believe that that's a little excessive, but those folks could see this in EME. It's really critical with moon bounce.
it could be the difference between you working Austral and me not working Austral, right? We can both hear them, but or vice versa.
Yes, yes.
The thing that I can't get over is the ZL1 with the dipole, because I have to tell you, coming into this, I assumed there was some minimum. Here's this array I'm going to have to start with, right? And it's going to have to be a ton of power, and that clearly, now I get it. It gets more difficult if you're only going to have a dipole. I understand all that, but it's fun to look and say, okay, this is possible. Now where do I want to take it? Which is pretty
That's
much
right.
what you said at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And really when Joe was asking what antenna or where do you go, that's really a great way to frame it is, well, where do you want to be on that scale? It works with a dipole, but you may have to spend a lot of hours. And of course, during that contest, I was CQing the entire weekend that the moon was up. So there was a lot of time opportunity there also. So yes, it's a trade between time availability and effective radiated power, basically.
Holy. So I did want to ask you that. What do you think your ERP is off of that array?
Oh, I should have
I
calculated.
know you've done the
that.
math.
Well, yeah, at one point, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I know that the array gain is what, 21.12 dBd. And so, there's the array gain. That's really what I focus on. And typically hearing is the harder part, but what I find with the array now is unless the station on the other end has noise. There have been a couple stations that have noise on their end, and so I can just decode them line after line after line after line, and they don't even know I'm there. And in those situations what's going on. It's noise on their end, and
Yeah.
that's just an increasing reality of everywhere. So, but it's just incredible fun. And like I said, Bob Sutton puts his dipole on a stick out in the open field, and away it goes. Just really, really great stuff.
You know, if we'd have had this conversation just 6 weeks ago, I'd assumed it was an April Fool's joke. I never would have thought that. I mean, on one hand, it's like, I get it. You can propagate, anything, but the idea of, again, it's not, there's no gain. So it's only part of the signal. So I don't care how much power he's putting into a dipole, only part of it is heading to the moon.
That's
And
right.
and then whatever percentage of that's coming back to your station is minuscule.
Yeah. And what I
So
love about Bob is he's up for that kind of a thrill, that kind of a challenge, that kind of a how low can we go? Can he hear if I try this? Watch this, and I love looking at those screenshots because to me that just allows me to relive those moments when I was like, really? And then Bob says, oh, by the way, I was running a dipole. Like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah.
that's really a great idea, by the way. They're almost like digital QSL cards or real-time QSL cards almost, right? Catching the screenshot. So when did you talk to him to find out that he only had a dipole?
On the chat page basically is where,
Okay.
yeah, where I find this out. And actually I need to credit Bob. Bob helped. I took a antenna and am preparing it also to try some de-expeditioning. I did a DG7 YBN design. It's a single 9-element on a 6M8 GJ boom, and Bob was the guy that helped me get the element lengths right. The corrective factor by how high it is off the boom. I homebrewed. I had Randy make the clamps, but I have fabricated a system. Now, what I need to do this summer is get the thing put up and test it so that I'm ready to go some places. But stay tuned because you might hear me out there going to a couple rare QTHs and kind of doing what Lance does. Go to some rare QTHs, put a new one on the air for guys. I want to make sure everything's ready because when I go out there, I want to be as successful as Lance. He's set the bar really high. I want to try to continue that.
What this really underscores, a lot of times I'll get emails from the Ohio Section Journal. I do the DX column there. And people will say, well, I'm kind of enjoying this DX thing, but I'd like to put more time. And what I always do is push back and say, you know what? Let's pick one. Clipperton, they're only on every 10 years. Or Bouvet, or 6-meter EME guys going to, you really, I hate to say this, you got to work them now. You got to
Right.
work them while they're workable because they may not be there.
That's right.
So this is actually probably motivating me as much as anything. Like, wow, I don't know how much longer. I got to get this going.
Yeah, it definitely is helpful, Bill. And if I can be of help in any way, please let me know. I've done lots of design on different things, and yeah, it's incredible fun. And I also enjoy helping others get going in this arena. It's just very gratifying.
Well, I said this last time. I hope your students realize how lucky they are because you're a very humble and incredibly knowledgeable person, and that's so important in your role as a teacher and professor. And plus, then you've got all the stuff to back it up. I mean, you've actually done it. We have all seen professors who they have theory only, and you can say, no. And what you said earlier was very intriguing to me. It's like I use this slide to show these guys digital communication, so I actually can see it, and what a difference that can make when you can visualize it. So, boy, you're just terrific. I just appreciate you and all you're doing, and can't thank you enough for being part of this. And I will send you some details because I got to get you in front of this with Exa Club via Zoom meeting. I know they would enjoy it. And maybe by the time Joe hears it twice, part of his array will be done. So
that's awesome. That is awesome, Bill. Thank you so much for the kind words. I dearly appreciate that. And absolutely, I do my best. I want my students strong out in industry. So I spent 28 years there before finding teaching. So my heart is and always will be in industry. I call that the real world, not in academia, out there in the real world. So yeah.
Yeah, good for you. Well, thank you, sir. Have a good week. I'll be in touch on the meeting and other stuff that comes along. And I'm going to keep an eye on your activities so we can bring you back again. So,
Bill, thank you.
Have a good day, sir. Thank you.
You too.
Was that exciting or what? Absolutely one of the most interesting podcasts we've had so far from a technical standpoint. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the DX Mentor. I would also like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than those sponsors. And today, of course, I would especially like to thank our guests, David, KJ9I, and Joe, WAGEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur-related issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you just have a question, you can email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Drop me a line if you have achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. If you're enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please remember, like, subscribe, and share. 7 threes for this episode, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I'll see you in the pile-ups.